The meeting is being recorded. Welcome everyone to XR Spokesperson training. My name's Miriam Robinson. I've also got Brad and Jane here to give a bit of assistance today with the spokesperson training. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge that we are all on stolen land that was never ceded. I'm personally in Ballarat, which is Wathaurong country, or in Jajawarong country, which is not far up the road from Jabberong country, which is where there's been a lot of drama going on with a certain highway project and trees being cut down. But good news, that's been postponed until at least February now, so that's a good thing. I pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging of the traditional owners in the land where we all are located, wherever that might be. I think most of you people are in Melbourne in Wurundjeri country. Also paying respects to the people working tirelessly, using up great energy and time and emotion to help solve or try to prevent or make less worse the climate emergency that we find ourselves in, and pay respects to everyone who's working very hard to try to do something about that in this terrible time that we find ourselves living in. I'm going to get right into it because I want to get through the slides as quickly as possible within like about the first hour or less. And then we're going to take a break and we're going to have a practice, I should say, not going to take a break, we have a practice of answering a few questions and pretending to be a spokesperson. And Jane and Brad and myself will pretend to be journalists asking tricky questions, and you'll have a practice of seeing how you go trying to answer them. And then we should have a period at the end for just sort of discussion and panel and questions and things like that. So if you've got questions, try to hold them until the end if you can, or you could even throw them into the chat. And Jane or someone might be able to answer any quick, simple questions while we're going, because otherwise we'll run out of time. So communications in general, what are we trying to do with Extinction Rebellion? Our main goal is recruitment, building a movement of 3.5% of the population. So we're still very much in recruitment mode. The reason why we want to recruit all these people is so that we can make change happen, to move the urgency dial for the climate crisis, to get governments to move. To do this, we use powerful emotions as much as possible. We know that emotions are the things that get people to change, not necessarily a whole lot of facts and statistics and science, yeah? So we tend not to blind people with a whole lot of climate science, because most people these days know the basics, and if they don't know the basics or they're not interested or they don't believe us, we don't waste our time on them. The sort of things we want people to have are strong emotions as love and fear. We try to project happiness and a nice vibe and confidence and courage in a lot of our actions. So we do brave things to inspire other people to take action and be brave. We also want people to be afraid, and we want people to be angry, because we know that those are very powerful motivating emotions. We don't want people to feel helpless and disempowered. We want people to be afraid, but we want people to feel that there's something they can do about it. Yeah, Jane does a long talk about don't mention the emergency if people are interested in seeing a very long, very good talk about emotions and things. But generally, and especially when you're thinking about being a media spokesperson, you want to be thinking of things that are emotional, inspiring, that might make people afraid, but will also tell them where the solutions are. So, you shout fire and you tell people where the exit is. You don't just wave your hands around shouting fire. You shout fire and point people towards the exit. You tell people smoking will kill you, but if you quit, you'll be better. So yeah, there's a lot of science behind all this, but we try to inspire these strong emotions: happiness, fear, anger, courage, and we try not to disempower people and make them feel helpless and hopeless and anxious and feel like there's nothing they can do about it. We always try to have a call to action. And when you're being a spokesperson for an event in the media, if you've got the event coming up, make sure you get a plug in there for the action. Don't forget to come along on Saturday, people. We'll see you on Saturday. We might be doing some pre-event interviews. We'll be sending the media release out for Saturday, probably about Wednesday or so, a couple of days ahead of the event, in case any journalists want to talk to us ahead of time. Sometimes they do. So make sure you get that plug in there. I did an interview with 3CR yesterday, and I made sure I gave it several times when, where, what we're going to be doing. So a call to action: come and join us, join the rebellion, things you can do, how you can be involved, etc. What we don't do is get into arguments with people. Don't get into an argument with your interviewer. Don't preach to the choir. Don't use too much science and statistics. Like I said before, a couple of statistics are good, but don't overdo it. And try not to be boring or a drag or so dour and serious that you just turn everybody off. Okay, so we try to project happiness, courage, etc. So our main audience for Extinction Rebellion is the obviously existing activists. They're already rebels. So we always want to praise their actions as being heroic and that sort of thing. We don't want to alienate any groups at all if we can help it. We want to get into the the mainstream, people who are already aware of what's going on, and get them to join. So your mums and dads, your taxi drivers, your lawyers, your butchers and so on. Ordinary people, we want to get them. We also want to talk to the change makers, people who can actually make change happen. So journalists, influencers, MPs, councils, we want to get into those groups. We want to basically push our bubble out from existing activists out into the mainstream, how to get more people engaged, how to talk to them. So when you're doing media spokesperson, you don't want to be, you want to be projecting an image that would make a mainstream person feel comfortable. We're not just preaching to the choir, to other activists. We try to use simple, clear language that anyone could understand and that is relatable to normal, everyday people. Yeah, I'll go into more detail about that later on. We're not interested in talking to climate deniers. We're not interested in convincing them. We're not going to get them anyway. We're not interested in time wasters. We're interested in getting into these people. We need 3.5%. We don't need 100%. So we've got 3 demands. I think most people here would know this, but for the benefit of people who might not and who might need a refresher, demand number 1, tell the truth, meaning we have to start speaking honestly about the climate emergency, start using the words climate emergency rather than climate change or global warming. So climate emergency is very good language. Jane started the climate emergency campaign, what about, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago or something, and everybody says it now. People used to call it global warming or climate change. Now everyone calls it the climate emergency. So that's the power of words. We want governments to declare a climate emergency. That's part of tell the truth. So that's demand number 1. Government declare a climate emergency, tell the truth about the urgency. Act now, which also means net zero emissions by 2025. We've got the governments, some of them around the world, starting to sign up to net zero by 2050. 2050 is too late, but at least it's a start. We've got to get them started. It really needs to be 2025. That's what the science says. But our government in Australia is not even signing up to this. Well, maybe we might be able to do something later in this century. We'll see. It's really not good enough. It needs to be a lot more urgent. Beyond politics and citizens' assemblies is all about setting up citizens' assemblies. Those, for people who don't know, are groups of, at the federal level, it'll be about 100 people. You could have a smaller one at your local council level, but at the federal level, it'll be about 100. Those people get chosen by lot through a process that's called sortition, which is meant to get a group of people from different ages, walks of life, genders, backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, so that you've got a representative demographic of the people. They would sit for as long as it takes, whether it's a month or whatever time people decide, consult all sorts of experts and come up with a sensible, common sense list of actions for the government to do. Now, they've got this already in the UK and in France. They're just advisory. There's nothing binding about them. We would prefer that they are binding, that the government must do as they say. But at least in UK and France, they're trying this out. And both of those citizens' assemblies have brought down their reports, and governments have been selectively picking a few of those things to start making into law, which is not perfect, but it's a start. For example, France just brought out a law saying that ecocide is now a crime. So that's something that's been achieved with the Citizens' Assembly. There's still a lot more needs to be done. And a lot of journalists will say, oh, that's impossible, that's never going to happen. But you can use that as an example, it's already happening. And we want that in Australia. Then you have your general sort of recruitment messages that we tend to use on social media and stuff, which is all about joining the rebellion and so forth. You can always ask people in the interviews to join the rebellion. These hashtags are more sort of social media stuff. But those are our main key messages. that we try to always make sure we refer back to at least one of them during an interview. So media, all right. So what does the media want? The media is a business, yeah. They want new stuff. So human beings love novelty. We're curious little monkeys and we love novelty. We're always on the lookout for something new, whether it's music or news or facts or whatever it is. So whatever you're doing needs to be new and interesting. This is one of the reasons we do creative stuff in Extinction Rebellion. So it's not just the same old boring old rallies or people standing around in front of Parliament House waving placards. Something new and different and exciting. News loves that. They love controversy and sensation. So big, bold statements, big, bold impact, more engaging to audiences. So some of our big, bold demands like net zero by 2025, it's bold. Gives the media something to talk about, yeah. They like expertise, so they like to provide a good product of someone who's informed and can give a unique perspective on something. So Extinction Rebellion rebels can often give them something a bit interesting, a bit different from the normal. They like to know what's happening right now. So immediacy, very important, especially if you're dealing with like radio and sometimes TV. So breaking news, we love our breaking news. They like to have access to people who can speak from direct experience or have interesting stories and anecdotes. Personal experience is engaging, interesting. Journalists are putting together a product, yeah? So they like predictability. So a journalist wants to present both sides. So quite often they'll interview a climate denier or an irate person stuck in traffic or something. And then they'll come to us for our perspective. So they get 2 or 3 different perspectives on a story. They like context and topicality. So can we connect what we are doing with a big current issue in the wider world? What's hot right now? So the December 12 actions, for example, are going to be all around the 5-year anniversary of the Paris Agreement and the beginning of the next round of discussions, which is coming up this year to redo those targets. So the Paris Agreement is about to expire. December 12 will actually be the 5-year anniversary. And now there's going to be another round of talks, which are going to be in Canada. So we can fit what we're doing into that global context. And you might have noticed in the newspaper that ScoMo is kind of reluctantly being dragged, very reluctantly, into making comments about how we're not going to use the Kyoto Protocol carryover credits, which is a bit of a mouthful. But he's finally beginning to make a few sympathetic noises about climate. It's also partly to do with Matthias Cormann's attempt to get a big UN job at the OECD. So we can connect Australia's position on climate. You'll often get asked, oh, Australia's not a very big polluter in the scheme of things. It doesn't matter what we do. Well, actually, it does matter what we do. So there's ways you can, if there's a way you can connect your action, like why are you running up and down the street waving signs, with something global, always good, yeah? The media wants appropriate stories for their audience. So, and be prepared to tailor your message. So if you're speaking to a 3AW radio shock jock, someone or other, you want to use, I mean, I don't want to be rude, but you want to use fairly small words and you want to keep it simple. And you might want to be a little bit shocking because your shock jock wants the shock, right? So you might be a bit cheeky to the shock jock. Things like this. So an appropriate, if you're talking to the ABC, it's a daytime show and it's a longer radio program, you can be a bit more sort of erudite and a bit more balanced and a bit more. So think about who your audience is and who you're talking to. And sometimes you can tailor yourself a little bit to that audience. Most of all, what the media wants is eyeballs. They need an audience. This is showbiz, okay? So they're presenting a product. The media is not a public service enterprise. It's a business and it's showbiz. So if you can be interesting, sensational, amusing, entertaining in some way, do it. And they'll get you back. Don't be like droning on, well, climate change is a really big problem and we have to get millions of tons of carbon. No, try to be fun and interesting and engaging if you can. So this is kind of the point I was making. Talk to the audience, don't preach to the choir. So don't be banging onto people who already know that the climate is an emergency. Try to be talking to people who don't know. So this graph, I pinched this from a UK guy who was giving a talk about this. So there's a graph of empathy and authority. So you want to hit a sweet spot that's sort of empathetic, so you're relatable, you're interesting, people can relate to you. Why should they care? And authority, credibility. Are you believable? So I've put this scientist up here to represent sort of credibility and believability. But a lot of scientists, bless them, aren't very good TV talent. Yeah. Bless their little socks. They tend to use big words and speak in complicated ways that a lot of people can't relate to. I've put dear old Donald Trump down here to represent someone who's relatable, interesting, that people care about. Now, you'd be surprised the number of people Trump followers who just believe him. And they say they believe him because they can relate to him because he's like a normal person. They're kind of sick of presidents who sound like they're robots just giving out talking points, and they don't sound natural and they don't sound real. So a lot of Trump supporters will say as much, that they believe Trump because they think he's a normal person. So, you can draw your own opinions about how that is. So the magic sweet spot, I've put Greta up here just as an example of someone who speaks with authority. She's believable. She's also relatable because she's young, she's vulnerable. She talks about herself and how she's scared. She's honest about that and people can relate to her, but she's also highly credible. She's not lying. She knows her facts and she's not afraid to say them. She never sounds like she's talking from a script. She sounds like she's talking from the heart. So if you can get that balance between being interesting, empathetic, and actually knowing your stuff and being credible, that's when you're going to do a good interview. So yeah, the media landscape has been changing a lot in recent years. So a lot of stuff's been moving online, like advertising revenue has gone off to Google and Facebook and all that, and the newspapers are struggling. They have diminished money, diminished ability to pay a lot of staff. A lot of experienced journalists are leaving the industry. Reporters are very, very busy, and they might be covering 5 stories at once because everyone's shorthanded and they're all a bit overworked. So don't assume that the journalist you're talking to knows anything at all about your issue. You have to assume they don't know anything about gas or fracking or coal or climate change or Paris agreements. You've got to assume they don't know. So the more you can help them out, the more you can help them out, the more you're going to get a good story. So if you're going to do an interview with a journalist, ideally beforehand, you get a chance to have a talk to them and find out what it is they're looking for. Now, remember, this is showbiz. So they might have an angle. They might say, oh, well, I'm going to talk about how, so-and-so was stuck in the traffic and didn't get to their business, whatever. They might have an angle. They might be very friendly. They might be wanting to talk about the Paris Agreement or something. But find out, ask them. If you can send them stuff beforehand so that they're briefed. So if you've got a whole lot of stuff about the Narrabri gas fields or a whole lot of stuff about the Paris Agreement or something that you can send to them in advance, that will help them ask you better questions. So instead of asking the same silly questions we get asked all the time, your journalist, if they've got a bit of stuff in front of them, might actually ask you a better question. Send them a list of what the demands are. And we'll be doing some of this media stuff for you, but a list of, and we'll prepare some stuff people can have. Like, what are the demands? What is Extinction Rebellion? What are they all about? So they might ask you better questions if they've got a bit more background information. Don't send them some massive 50-page report. They're not going to read it. But if you can send them some dot points, that'll help them to formulate some better questions that you will know the answers to. So that's a win-win. Yeah, and you'll get a better interview. Preparation is very important. Have a think about who you're going to be talking to. If you're talking to someone friendly, like local radio, like 3CR, your local paper, those, or a blogger or someone who's writing, who's, Green Left Weekly, they're on board. And they're usually very easy interviews, and they'll usually ask you good questions that are easy for you to answer. They'll usually be very positive and easy interviews. They're good for beginners who haven't had a go to do those ones. The middle of the roads, your ABC, The Age, Sydney Morning Herald, outlets like that, they're kind of middle of the road. They won't give you a hard time, but they won't give you a free ride either. And then you've got your hostile media. So your right-wing talkback radios, your Murdoch Press, your Channel 7s, your Sky News, they're usually very hostile. They usually ask you very hostile questions. These are not the best for beginners. It's best to start off with something a bit easier before you get thrown in the deep end with these hostile ones. I don't mind doing the hostile ones. I have a good time. I have fun with them. But it can be a bit of a shock the first time you do one. Yeah, and Brad has fun with them too. We're going to do some practice later on. Brad's going to pretend to be a shock jock. Yeah, they'll throw you very hostile questions, but there's no reason why you can't answer them in the way you want to, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Write down the interviewer's name on a piece of paper on the back of your hand or something. There's nothing worse than calling your interviewer John when his name's Joe or something. It sounds terrible. Just write it down. If you're doing 3 or 4 interviews in the one day, it's very easy. Believe me, I've done it throughout the hectic of everything. So just write it down. Try to anticipate the kind of questions you'll be asked. As I say, if you know if they're friendly or not friendly, you'll have a pretty fair idea what sort of questions they're probably going to ask you. Have a bit of a think in your head how you're going to answer those. Know what you're going to say and how you're going to say it. It's a very good idea to have some dot points, and we have actually got some dot points which I'll be sending out to everyone later on that you can choose from. So depending on your audience, you might have a different set of dot points. If you've got some facts that you don't want to get wrong, like a statistic or a number, just one number, 2 numbers, not too many numbers, but if you've got a couple, write them down because you don't want to mess that up. Your personal experiences will count for much more than rhetoric and banging on. Yeah. If you can say a personal story about yourself, say, well, I took early retirement from my work because I thought it was more important to start working about the climate emergency because I'm worried about my children, or something like that. If you can make it personal, be honest, don't just make up a lie because it'll show. Tell the truth. But a personal experience, if you've got a little personal story that you can trot out, it's gold. Okay, so the different types of media, yeah. So we still call it print, even though it's not so much printed anymore. A lot of it's online now, but it's still called print. As opposed to other mediums where a big smile and a cheeky comeback can go a long way. Print is all about getting those words right. So be very careful what you say. Newspapers are still very influential. So a story in the newspaper can spark a lot of interest from other media outlets. Most media outlets, the first thing they'll do in the morning is look at the newspaper headlines and they have a look and see if there's a story there they think might be interesting for them to pick up. Especially things like radio will often do that. And the politicians will read the papers. They get a list of news clippings every morning sent to them. So if they're the Minister for Climate or whatever, they will get a set of clippings about climate stories. So newspapers are still very influential. Print is never live, but you will be interviewed on the phone most of the time, especially these days, rather than in person, and you will be recorded. So watch what you say. Sometimes there's an opportunity to retract something if you made a mistake, but don't rely on it. Try to get it right the first time. Print stays on the record for a long time, like years later. That newspaper story will still be there when the TV interview might have gone. Watch what you say even before and after the real interview. Right, so quite often a journalist will talk to you and they'll just have general sort of chit chat, getting to know you, a bit of gossip, bit of this, bit of that. Watch what you say. Don't be funny. Don't make a joke. Just be careful. Then they'll have the real interview and they'll ask you questions and you'll answer them. They'll ask you a question, you'll answer it. And then after the real interview, they'll chat with you again. And if they're a naughty journalist, they'll be trying to trick you into saying something printable that's sensational or something. So watch what you say. Be friendly, but keep your guard up. Yeah. Be factual, be polite, be honest. Don't muck around. Nothing is off the record. Don't say anything rude about someone or anything like that because you can get caught. I've been caught more than once with just something I thought was an offhand remark ends up in the article. Yeah. So there's no such thing as an offhand remark. Newspapers. Radio. Okay, so radio is terrific for breaking news. So quite often when something's happening, you'll get radio stations ringing up wanting to talk to people now. So they say, what's happening in the city? Where's the traffic jam? When's it going to end? I just heard that something happened. There's people being arrested. So radio wants now. There are other kind of radio stories which are more sort of magazine-y, backgroundy stuff. But a lot of the time radios want breaking news happening right now. You will talk to a producer. You won't be talking straight to the on-air performer usually. There'll be a producer that will talk to you before the interview. And they will usually give you a bit of an idea of the sort of things they want to ask you. So that's good, gives you 10 minutes to have a think. Most radio interviews at the moment are being conducted by phone, especially because of COVID. It's better to do it in the studio, but you'll probably be on the phone. You'll get a chance, if you're going to the studio, it's good because you can get a chance to talk to the reporter and you can use body language and stuff to build rapport, but mostly you're on the phone. Now, when you're doing a phone interview, don't hold this too close to your face and yell into it because it will make the sound distorted. Hold the phone a nice distance away, speak in a normal voice, don't yell. If you're doing this into the phone really loudly, it's going to be distorted, so don't do that. Hold the phone away nicely. Find a quiet spot to do the phone call. So I've done radio interviews while there's been like shouting and yelling and chanting and drumming and goodness knows what going on in the street, yeah? A little bit of background noise is not bad, sometimes for atmosphere, but I've done things like ducked into the foyer of a building to get a quiet spot to do an interview. People sort of look at you a bit funny, you know, while you're doing it, but just ignore them. So you might have to duck into the foyer of a building. If a radio rings you and you're on the tram, just say, oh, okay, hang on a minute, I'll get off. So hop off the tram, go and find a cafe or something where you can sit, or a corner you can sit somewhere quiet. So that's kind of important for radio, the sound quality. There are different varieties of radio. There's talkback. It will be live. You might get 60 seconds or 2 minutes to make your point. Jane does fond of doing talkback, and so is Brad. Quite often just ring up the show and go blah, 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 climate emergency, blah, blah, climate emergency. It's amazing what you can get into 60 seconds if you know what you're doing. News grab. So sometimes TV crew or something, or even radio, might turn up at your demo and they might ask you 3 or 4 or 5 questions. They might talk to you for quite a long time. But what ends up on the show is 10 seconds of what you said. We're in a climate and ecological emergency and we need to act now. Bang, that's it. Or they might pick something naughty that you said and use that. You never know. So watch what you say. They will trick you and they will just pull a bit out. Most of the time they want to make a good show. So most of the time they're not out to get you. But just be aware. An interview might be cut up and used in lots of different ways. So if you spoke to them for 10 minutes, they might use a bit here and a bit there and a bit somewhere else later for some other thing. A longer interview might be live or might be pre-recorded. Longer interviews can be 10 minutes, can be half an hour, depends on the show. You won't be able to edit it and go back and fix it if you make a mistake. So just get it right and think about what you're doing. And last of all, TV. So television is, not surprisingly, highly visual. So if you're going to be on the telly, tidy yourself up a bit. You know, you might want to run a comb through your hair, or maybe even pop on a bit of lippy, or borrow a jacket from someone, something so you look a bit presentable. So we want to present a mainstream friendly image. If you've got 10 piercings, consider maybe taking a couple of them out just to go on the telly. It's up to you, personal choice, but be on brand, have a badge or a t-shirt or something on so that the brand gets in there on the television. I was listening to this UK interview and he recommends having a big stretch before you do a TV so that you feel and look relaxed and you're standing up straight. Have a bit of a stretch, have a smile as appropriate. I mean, if there's a story that something terrible has happened, don't be all grinning like a fool, but generally smiling, being approachable, be very present, be focused only on what you're doing. Before you do an interview, the camera crew or whoever will tell you whether they want you to look at the camera or at the journo. Okay, so if you're doing a TV cross to the studio, they'll usually want you to look down the barrel of the camera. If you've got a journo there, they'll want you to look at the journo. So just ask them which one they want and do that. Try to stick to, don't be looking around like this, it looks weird. Keep your eyes either on the camera or on the journo. A new soundbite, similar to what I was talking about before with the radio, you might do an interview with someone for quite a long time, but they'll only take a little tiny bit out of it. It's a good idea to have some snappy comebacks ready, and I've got a couple of examples I'll be showing you in a minute. A live TV interview, either in the studio or out in the street somewhere, can be very intimidating. Again, not so great for beginners. Better to let someone who's done it before do the live, if you can. When you've had a bit of practice, then you'll get good at that. But live TV can be a bit daunting. Or you might be doing a longer current affairs story. So Brad and Jane did a story for the 7:30 report, I think it was, wasn't it? Went for about 10 minutes. And it was a longer sort of backgroundy piece with quite a few different people being interviewed, talking about activism and so forth. You may have to do some acting, one of these, which can be a bit weird for people. They might film you coming in through a door and going and sitting down or something. You may have to do it 2 or 3 times. In fact, in Jane's case, they were filming you meditating or something, which was a bit weird. If they ask you to act, just be as convincing as you can. Just go with it, because if you look awkward and weird, it'll look awkward and weird. So just have commitment and just do it. If you make a mistake doing one of these stories, you will have a chance to do it over again. They won't mind. Similar with this, but you can't do it with live. But if you make a mistake, if you fluff up something you're saying and stumble over a word, just say, oh, hang on, sorry, can we start again? They won't mind. They will prefer you to do it again and they get a good take than that they have some material that they just can't use. So don't be afraid to say, oh dear, can we do that again? They won't mind. But obviously if you're doing it live, you're stuck. So don't mess up. To summarize, be polite, okay? Never be rude to your presenter, even if they're rude to you. Always return politeness, even if they're being rude. In the shock jock example, be prepared. Have a few facts in front of you. Try to be interesting. Stay positive. Don't lose your cool. Don't lose your temper. Journalists are just doing their job. They're just doing a job. You may not agree with it, what they're doing, but that's their job to do that. That's what they're being told to do. It's not their fault. They're not the enemy. So this interview here, this lady was asking me all sorts of silly questions because it's Sunrise and that's what they do. It's not her fault. It's just a job. It's a game. Just hit the ball back across the net. Yeah, this is a game. So if they hit the ball to you, you just lob it back. That's fine. Don't hit it out of bounds. Just hit it back across the net. Speak slowly and clearly. Small words, short sentences. If you've got something difficult to say, like Citizens Assembly, practice in front of the mirror. Citizens Assembly, Citizens Assembly, Citizens Assembly, Citizens Assembly. So you can say it without stumbling. Kyoto Protocol, Kyoto Protocol. Those things can be quite hard to say, especially when you're under pressure, but slow down, have a practice, especially with hard words like that. Don't babble. Don't just go blah, 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 and don't stop for a breath. Take a breath every now and again. Because if they're going to cut up what you say into small chunks, the editor needs to have a break, a pause, a breath every now and again where they can cut. If you just go babble, 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 they might not be able to use it at all. They might just go, oh, throw that one away because I can't use it. So if you answer a question and take a breath, not only does it help the editor, it makes you sound like you know what you're talking about. It makes you sound authoritative. Just go, I'm glad you asked me that, or something. Just give yourself a moment to take a breath and have a think before bouncing in and answering the question straight away. It makes you sound more authoritative, gives you gravitas. You will decide how you're going to answer a question. And we'll have some practice and some talk about doing that in a minute. You've often seen on the TV, the politician will get asked a question and they'll just answer something completely different, as if that question never even got asked, right? It's infuriating, but that's what they do. And there's no reason we can't do that. You can say, I'm glad you asked me that, but before I answer that, I'm going to say something completely different, right? It's a good trick. You get your message in there. Climate emergency, act now, tell the truth, whatever your message is that you want to get through, and carefully study some other examples. Now, I'm going to send a sheet through after this that's got a whole lot of examples that Jane's put together. of different interviews, radio, TV, etc., that you can have a look at and just study them and think, oh, that was a good comeback, or oh, I like the way they did that, or I didn't like the way they did that. This is a TV interview here that I did on Sunrise. So I will be sending you all this stuff later that you can, so you can have a bit of a look and a bit of a listen to the interviews and see what you liked or what you didn't like about them and how you think you might be able to do that. So the questions we are most commonly asked, we get asked these questions all the time. They'll probably ask you, who are you and what are you doing today? That's a pretty straightforward journalistic question. So what's happening today? Oh, well, we're in Burke Street. We've got the Rebel Parade and we're going to do this and we're going to do that. We're going to do the other thing. So have a good answer to that. Sometimes people will ask you, well, what is Extinction Rebellion? What is it? And you can say, we're part of a global movement. We've got 3 demands, blah, blah, blah. Now, I've got a sheet with the answers to these, so don't panic too much. Again, I will be sending that sheet round later on. Very commonly asked question is, what do you say to people who don't like Extinction Rebellion because you're being a nuisance and you're blocking the traffic and all that sort of stuff? What do you expect to get out of this? Why are you doing it? Why is it road blocking? What do you want to get out of it? Do you think you're turning people off? Do you think Extinction Rebellion is losing support by blocking people in the traffic? They ask us that one all the time. And what are you trying to do? They may be asked that more than once in the same interview. Are you all on the dole? Commonly asked question. So what's your solution? Commonly asked question. Do you eat meat, drive a car, use a mobile phone, whatever? Did you drive to the demo? How did you get to the demo? Did you drive? We often get asked that one. But what about the economy? We can't shut down the coal industry. It's impossible. What do you say to people who are losing their jobs or stuck in the traffic or whatever? Renewable energy, what about when the sun doesn't shine? So those are the most, I reckon, and Jane and Brad might have others, but I reckon they're the questions we get asked all the time. So you should have some ideas for how to come back at those. And again, I have got a sheet that I'll be sending around. Interview tips and tricks. You can stop and start if you make a mistake, like I said before, as long as it's not live. They won't mind. So if you mess something up, stumble over Kyoto Protocol or something, have another go, they won't mind. Be likable, smile. Even when you're on radio, it comes across in the sound of your voice. Try not to be grim. Yeah, we want to be likable, approachable, relatable, like the stuff I was saying earlier. Repeat those key messages. We want the government to respond to the climate crisis. We have 3 demands. Gas is just as bad as coal. Those sorts of things, get those messages in there, and you may have to say it more than once. Promote the calls to action. We want people to join the rebellion. We want people to come to the demo tomorrow. Respectfully dominate, say what you want, not what they want. So you can be like, yes, I get it. But a more important question is, does the government have a plan? They ask you, but what about people being stuck in traffic? Yeah, I get that. I understand. People don't like being stuck in traffic. But what's the government's plan about the climate emergency? Just skip that silly question and go on to the next one. You can say, yes, I understand that, but coal miners are already losing their jobs. So if they say, what do you say to people who are losing, who say, oh, it's we just have to get out of the COVID and there's a recession and what are you going to, yes, I get that. I understand. But coal miners are losing their jobs. We need to start the transition now, blah, blah, blah. So get sort of back on track on what you want to talk about. You can say, look, I don't have all the answers. I don't know what the solutions are. We don't know everything, but that's why we need a citizens' assembly. Then you can get the citizens' assembly in there, you see, if they ask, say, what's your solution? Yes, this is disruptive. We get that this is disruptive, but civilization is at stake. We're trying to warn people. We're trying to wake people up. So instead of getting into an argument with them about a traffic jam, say, look, it's disruptive, but it's going to be more disruptive if the climate runs out of control, blah, 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 blah. Then you can start talking about the climate emergency. So change the subject. Yeah? Whether I drive a car or eat meat or use a mobile phone or whatever is nothing compared to what the fossil fuel industry is doing. They're the bad guys. You see how I did that? Sneaky, huh? So don't be afraid to turn the tables on the interviewer. But yes, just acknowledge the question. Yes, I understand. But I'm going to talk about this. Politely correct errors. So if they say something that's wrong or incorrect, don't be afraid to correct them. Say, no, I'm sorry, I don't agree with that. I think it's the so-and-so. Or that's not actually the case. In fact, the case is blah, blah, blah. Because they will try to lead you. Don't be led. And if they say something that's factually incorrect, just correct it. But be polite. Never get into an argument. Keep your sense of humour. Don't talk over each other, especially on radio. It's really terrible. Don't talk over them. If they keep banging on and saying silly things, if they're being rude to you, their audience won't like them. They'll be the bad guy. I've done some bad interview or some hostile interviews and Facebook and that comments have been, gee, that interviewer was really rude. You handled that really well, not to lose your temper. Gee whiz, how did you stay so polite when they were being so horrible? So if you stay nice and cool and don't get drawn into an argument, you will get points for that from the audience. And a classic line is, we just might have to agree to disagree. And then stop talking and wait for them to ask you another question. Okay, so just get out of it. Don't get into an argument. Don't panic. Don't babble. Speak slowly and calmly. Say what you want to say. It's probably going better than you think. And quite often you're doing an interview and you think, oh, this is terrible. Just be confident. Keep going. It's the interviewer's job. They'll look after you. They want to get a good story. So you listen back afterwards and go, that wasn't as bad as I thought. So keep calm. Don't babble. Taking interviews to the next level. So you've got your basic techniques we're just talking about, but if you want to make it even better, and sometimes this takes a bit of practice, but this is how things can be made even better, have an opening statement ready. So no matter what they ask you, they can ask you anything, apart from, good morning or something. You say, that's a good question. But before we get to that, I'd just like to say, this has been the hottest year on record. Or did you know the United Nations had just announced something or other? Or there's a big new battery being built or something. If you have something ready, and especially if it's something topical or interesting, you can start the interview with that. Journalists won't mind if it's interesting. They might probably get back to that because, oh yes, that's right, we're getting back to that question. Yes, so forth. So ask me that question again. But have an opening statement, especially if it's something interesting or topical that happened today. Giving an example. So rather than reeling off a whole lot of facts and figures and numbers that don't mean anything to most people, use the phrase, for example. So you can say, for example, global food production is already going down. Coal companies can't get loans. Renewable energy is up. Most voters want climate action. So don't get too uptight about having the numbers at your fingertips. Keep it simple and relatable. Rather than say, same sort of thing, rather than say Australia emits X tons of CO2, you can say Australia has the highest emissions per capita, is one of the biggest exporters, whatever, in the world. It is a good idea to have those numbers at your fingertips just in case they might ask you, get caught short. But don't use them. Use a simple phrase rather than a figure if you can, but it's good to have it just in case. Otherwise you can look a bit silly. And if you don't know, say, I'm not sure of the exact number, but people can Google it or something. Don't just make something up. It might be tempting. Don't just make it up. Try not to use jargon as much as you can. So we know what climate and ecological crisis means, and we know what climate justice, we know what we mean when we say those things, but the general public, you might just go straight over their head. So try to use plain, simple language, like we're in a crisis because of climate change and pollution and deforestation. Species are going extinct. This is a big problem. Bang. So try not to, we know what we mean, but the general public might not understand what that means. So keep your language simple. Again, remember your audience. And above all, make it personal. Why do you care? What does it mean to you? Be relatable. You might say, no, I grew up on a farm and now that river near the farm has gone dry. Or in my town, I was affected by bushfire, and say which town. Or my kids asked me the other day something or other. Or, so be honest, speak from the heart. Don't be afraid to be a bit emotional. It'll get you points. It'll make a better interview rather than reeling off a whole lot of facts and statistics and catchphrases and things. Yeah. Specific messages we're kind of getting around using for Festival of Love and Rage, and we're still tinkering around with these a bit, but the general idea is doing nothing risks everything, which means it's urgent. Climate and ecological emergency is beyond urgent. The window's closing. If you thought COVID was bad, you had to say nothing yet. We can't wait around for the next election. We need the government to act now. people power will get governments to move. That's why we're doing this. It's time to get out of the house and into the street. 3.5% of the population actively involved makes change happen, or has been known to make change happen. We need to shift the dial, things like this. So urgent messages. We have a list of talking points, which I'm going to send around, but these are the kind of ideas we've been playing around with. So if you're going to be a spokesperson, you can read through that sheet, read through it several times, and hopefully at the right moment, a response will pop into your head, which would be great. So we need to study those. Okay, we're going to have some practice, and we're running really well for time, so we're going to have plenty of time to do this. So that's fantastic. So who would like to be our first volunteer? Jane said she was going to be the print journo. So I need volunteers to turn your sound off. In fact, I'll stop the screen share now. So I need one person for Jane to throw some questions at and for them to respond. And then, so we'll let that go for about, I don't know, 5 or 10 minutes or something. And then we'll all get a chance to say how we think they went. So don't worry, there's no stakes. If you mess it up, that's why we're doing practice. So don't feel bad. So we'll just say, it might have been better if you'd done it this way or that way, or that was a good answer or whatever. So we'll give you a bit of a critique afterwards. So who wants to be our first guinea pig?
Can I just say the newspaper one's the easy one? So you might not want to go first, but I just encourage you, if you want the easy one, to start now. Yep, Peter's going for it.
Okay. Peter. Okay.
All right, and so we make it that this is the day before, December 12th?
Okay, day before, yeah. And you're from the age.
From the age. All right.
December 12th, the day before the action.
Yeah. So the action's coming up. The Festival of Love Range in Melbourne is coming up. And you're our spokesperson, and I'm a fairly passably sympathetic journalist who's just going to ask you about it, basically. All right. And I'm going to try and watch the time. Probably 5 minutes is more than enough, really. It's not like you get that long usually. Okay. So, Peter, you're from Extinction Rebellion.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I am. Hi there, Jane. Nice to speak to you.
So, what's this action that's coming up?
So the action tomorrow, December the 13th, is a general people action, bringing people out onto the streets to bring attention and awareness and cause disruption to ensure that people are aware of the coming climate emergency and that we have a limited time to act before there is ecological disaster that can't be halted.
So what exactly is going to be happening? Should we be expecting much disruption?
So we've got some very fun activities planned, a moving blockade, moving down from Carlton Gardens into the city, where we'll have our Rebel Rhythm group banging drums and causing a large amount of noise and happiness and dancing with people in beautiful costumes. We'll also have a flotilla coming down the Yarra with people having large, loud and active protests against the government's inaction and a call for action to make sure that governments take this responsibility seriously, and we get our demands met of telling the truth and acting now, and ensuring that we have a citizens' assembly to advise governments on what should be done to prevent the coming emergency.
So isn't this really just what climate groups have been doing for ages? I can't understand why you're having this festival thing.
The point is to bring people out. It's to ensure that we bring people out, make sure that governments are aware that people have the power to cause disruption in the system if our concerns aren't met. And at the end of the day, a climate emergency doesn't threaten one group of people over the other. It threatens the civilization of the entire planet. So we're not just protesting, we are taking it to the government that they need to act, or we will continue to further disruption. And we're bringing people onto side on that in a very fun, energetic way.
Well, but I think usually though you disrupt people and you stop traffic, isn't that actually turning people against you?
At the end, I disagree with that. I don't think necessarily. I think it gives people something to think about, that there is an action going on that needs that the issue needs to be addressed. And when people see other people taking part in the street, I think it does get them to question as to why is that person doing that, and why are they disrupting traffic? As to the actual concerns that people have, ultimately the destruction of the environment is going to be much more impactful on your life than 5 minutes lost to having to detour around a blockade.
So what are you actually hoping to achieve? I mean, we have a government at the moment that is not super keen on climate action. What are you trying for?
So getting a large percentage of the mainstream people on side. At the end of the day, we need people to voice their objections to government. That is how we change government policy. It's how we change government views, is by people saying enough is enough. We want change now. And the action is essentially to bring awareness to that, make sure that people are on side and that people are shouting out, building the people's infrastructure to eventually have a citizens' assembly that can direct government directly.
Okay, and before we finish up, Peter, perhaps you'd like to explain what will your role be tomorrow?
Tomorrow I'll be on the streets. I'll be in the blockade moving down from Carlton Gardens. I'll be handing out pamphlets and talking to anybody who's interested, wants to get involved, as well as spreading information on the activity we're doing in Extinction Rebellion tomorrow on December the 13th.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. I was very nervous.
It's harder than it looks, isn't it? So how do you think Peter went? I think you got the date wrong, Peter. It's December the 12th.
I'm sorry.
Don't worry, the journalists will have had a press release with most of that stuff in it already, but you never know. How did people think Peter went?
Why don't we let Peter say how he went
Peter,
first? You know,
yeah.
We're always our harshest critics.
Yeah, so I mean, I was a debater for quite a while in university, so I think got the arguments down. I'm a bit nervous. I'm really scared of saying the wrong thing or inadvertently not, saying something that's wrong, and then like catching me out on that and be like, well, no, that's what I meant, and getting more flustered. So definitely got a bit more flustered as it went on, but I think it went okay.
Oh, it wasn't obvious to me you were getting more flustered. I think you've got a lovely, calm, authoritative style, in fact.
No, that's good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Like you're getting more confident as you went along, actually.
Oh, great. Okay. Then as I feel flustered, I'll just be more.
Mm-hmm. And I just encourage everybody as they're giving feedback to actually say some positive as well as some negative, because somebody who just gets terrified by doing this stuff, I just know it's sort of like it's important to learn, but it also just hurts as people go, all the stuff that you did wrong and everyone's seen it.
Yeah. If you feel yourself getting flustered and you feel like you're starting to gabble, just, especially if you're doing the newspaper print, you don't have to fill up space. You can go, yeah, before you answer.
Yeah, I suppose that's probably, it's good to keep that in mind, because as I forgot that we're doing a newspaper, I've got the time to stop and be like, well, okay, rather than being on the streets and having to get it out quickly.
That's right. So that's, perfectly. And even if you're doing radio or something, it's okay to go, that's a good question. And, before you answer, unless it's talk back, which can be a bit faster. Anyone else have any feedback for Peter? Dan?
Yeah, I thought you did great, Peter. Well done. Maintained a reasonably cheerful but credible kind of demeanor, and maintained. Sounded quite articulate. It did sound like a radio interview, but that's already been touched on. And the only other little thing I was thinking of at the time was like that difference between we're raising awareness versus we're demanding action.
Yeah.
And the difference in ambition of saying, we're not just awareness raising, we're pushing for action.
I think that's really good, because I was thinking that in my head as I was saying it, because it's become, I'm so used to saying raising awareness for stuff, and it's like, no, well, actually we're not. We're demanding that stuff be done because everybody's aware of the problem now.
We're doing both. It's fine to do both. One of the things I say sometimes is is we get out in the streets, because a lot of people say, well, if it was an emergency, why aren't people running up and down the streets? To say, well, we are running up and down the street so that people realise that it's an emergency. It's so urgent. That's why we're running up and down the street, yelling out. So that's, you know, one sort of snappy comeback sometimes.
Look, a really good line that Brad has down to a fine art is a whole sort of line about we're sounding the alarm. You know, we're on the street because we're sounding the alarm. We're sounding the alarm because it's an emergency. People might find the alarm sort of annoying, but really that's not the problem. The problem is the fire.
Yeah, that's always a good comeback to, what do you say to people who are stuck in traffic and they're really annoyed? So, well, you get annoyed if a smoke alarm wakes you up in the middle of the night, wouldn't you? But you want the smoke alarm not to wake you up. You want the house to burn down, you know, things like that. Play around with it, make it your own. Marco, I think you want to say something before?
Yeah, I guess, yeah, really good. I thought maybe a little bit of historical context on, like, when asked about, yeah, the tactics, like, why are you doing this? Like, yeah, we're raising the arm, but we're doing this because we know civil disobedience works, mass civil disobedience works, and that's why we're taking to the streets. And participate in these kinds of actions, I think, is important. And even if you can maybe chuck in, yeah, like a Gandhi kind of example, that could help maybe.
Well, I was going to ask that question when you brought up the personal stories, because I'm from South Africa. Like, yeah. So oftentimes I talk to my friends about the use of civil disobedience against apartheid, and wondering if that would be appropriate to bring in an Australian context.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great.
Personal story like that, the journalists would eat that stuff up. Say,
great.
Well, I'm from South Africa, and I know that civil disobedience and so on works because, you know, we got the end of the apartheid. Everyone said it couldn't be done, but it could be done. This kind of stuff.
Great.
We did have a consultation from a very expert media person, Damien Lawson, and he said that we do generally well in sort of talking about our three demands, you know, but the thing we don't do as well is to talk about a theory of change, that basically we're going to do escalating civil disobedience till we win. Like, it's good to get that in somewhere because civil disobedience works, and it's been shown, you know, found in history when we've tried everything else, that's what's pushed a movement over into a win. So we tend to forget to say that. It's one of the most unique things about us. Like, our demands are stronger than most, well, any. Our way of describing the science, that we're risking, you know, we're risking collapse of human civilization and billions of deaths, is stronger than most. But the thing that really stands us apart is that we're going to keep disrupting in an escalating way until we win. And the other thing he always says to remember is to mention the next big event. In this case, it's easy because it's the 12th of December. But, you know, if that was over, you would say, and we're going to be back on the streets in March, even bigger. Because you're wanting to orient people towards coming to the next big thing, and you're wanting to convey that there is a next big thing coming.
Yeah, we will keep doing this until we win. Yeah, that's always one of the things, because journalists are often like, they're used to people doing a march or a rally or something, and people have their march and they have their rally and tens of thousands of people come out, and then everyone goes home and nothing changes. I did an interview with John Fain, and he said, you've only got 200 people. This is rubbish. You know, there was 15,000 people on the street last week for the kids' school strike. You've only got 200 people. This is complete rubbish. This is nonsense. And I said, well, you'd be surprised how disruptive 200 people can be. You know, and we're going to be here all week. So you got to, you know, you throw the question back at them, back across the net. Yes, Brad.
Yeah, look, just on that point too, if they do criticise your numbers, you can always point out that Greta started as one person, and look what grew from that. And most people understand that story, and it's a really powerful narrative. And I thought you were good, Peter. You're really coherent the whole time. You got those key messages in, and you got the three key demands in, and that's a win every time. So yeah, well done.
Good job. Well, on that note, who wants to be a volunteer to do a radio interview with Brad?
I'll have a go.
Have a go, Brenda.
Oh.
Good on you.
Okay.
Now,
Warning, it's Brad the shock jock, isn't it?
Brad's going to be 3AW, and he's going to be a little bit tough. Don't panic.
All right.
Okay. He's going to be a little bit. He's going to ask a couple of naughty questions, but you've had some examples already, so you're a bit ahead of where Peter was because you've already had a bit of priming up. So off you go, Brad. Don't be too cruel.
Oh, hello, Brenda. Yeah, I'm just wondering what makes you think you've got the right to stop people getting home from work tonight?
Well, that's a good question, and I understand it's pretty irritating for people being delayed. But I think that a bigger question is why people in the fossil fuel industry and the government feel that they have the right to cause such destruction of our environment, and that we can do something about this. We have the answers and we're not doing it. I think that's a bigger question, and I think it, yes, it causes people a bit of inconvenience for a while, but these big questions have got to be answered. We've got to sort this out.
Yes, but people also want the lights to turn on when they get home. And you know, after a hot day at work, they want to get home and turn the air conditioner on too.
Yeah.
What are you proposing to do there? Because I can't see any solutions out of your group.
Yeah, well, you know, that's a concern that a lot of people have, and I think that we need to have the truth told about the viability of renewable energy, and about battery power, and the fact that we can actually do this. We have the technology to do this. But I think a lot of people are not aware of how far along renewable energy is actually shifted, and the kinds of solutions that are now available which do not emit the sorts of dangerous emissions into the atmosphere that we currently have, which is contributing to the climate emergency. We can sort this out, and we can do it really quickly, and we can create jobs. So I just would like more people to know that and understand it.
Your group talks about a climate emergency all the time, but hasn't the climate always changed, Brenda?
Oh, of course the climate has always changed, but what's really become apparent is that human impact on climate, on the warming of the atmosphere, is just getting worse and worse. We actually do cause the warming of the climate in a way which is quite different to those natural cycles which have occurred over time. There's no question that climate has always changed, but it's how we're impacting on that that needs to be addressed now. And we can actually do this. We can turn this around if we choose to do it.
Okay, well, I accept what you say, but if we are impacting on all that, what's your impact on that? Do you drive a car?
Yes, I drive a car. Yep.
So aren't you part of the problem too then?
I think we're all part of the problem, but we can all be part of the solution as well. You can choose how often you drive your car. You can choose whether you buy an electric car. You have choices within there. And that's the whole message, really. You think about what you do in your everyday life and the choices that you make and how you contribute to the problem or you're contributing to the solution.
Okay, so Extinction Rebellion is telling us that we all just need to get out there and buy electric cars and everything will be solved. Is that right?
Well, that's one part of the solution, but there are many other parts to the problem, and there are many other solutions to it. I mean, it's not just about electric cars, obviously. It's about all sorts of aspects of our lives that we can change. That's quite empowering. And I think a lot of people are on board with that. People are recycling, they're thinking about sustainability, they're growing their own food. In COVID, that's happened. People are doing all sorts of things. But it's important to feel that you can contribute to changing the world and changing it for the better. What's the harm in having cleaner air, cleaner water, preserving our environment? What's so horrible about that? I can't really see a downside.
Yeah, look, I think we all like to breathe clean air. I don't think anybody's going to realistically argue with you about that, but I don't think we can all afford to go out and buy electric cars. This is the problem I think that normal everyday people have with radical groups like Extinction Rebellion.
Well, I think the thing is that the role of government is really important in this. And I want to know what the government's doing about this. The government can actually help a lot of people in China, for instance, the government actually subsidises people to buy electric cars. They make it more expensive for you to buy a non-electric car. Why aren't we looking at solutions like that?
Okay, so you want Australia to adopt an authoritarian regime and to shut down democracy and force people to live the way that you want them to live. Is that what you want?
No, I just think it's interesting that a country like China has got an emissions target, and we don't. And they also encourage people to buy electric cars, and we don't. I think that's kind of interesting. I'm not defending anything that China does in the human rights field, no. But I find it interesting that they are concerned about climate change and about the climate emergency in a way that we're not.
Okay, we've got to cut to an ad break now. Thank you for your time, Brenda. I'll see what the listeners think of that.
Okay, thank you.
Great job, Brad. That's exactly what they do. That's fantastic. You saw how Brad was getting you to get into a debate about electric cars and stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what they do. But I thought that was very good, because you consider the 3AW audience and talking to them about things like that is something they can relate to. I thought that was very good. Good way of handling those questions. You didn't get the demands in there so much, but sometimes when you're talking to 3AW, it just depends. What do other people think?
Can I just say, I went pretty hard at you then, Brenda, and I thought you did really well, because you kept coming back at me, stayed calm, and you had a coherent argument every time. The only criticism I would make is that you didn't get the demands in there or the key messages. And it's important that everyone remembers they are your best defense a lot of the time, because we're not a prescriptive movement. We're not saying we've got all the answers. And when you do get the really tricky questions, it's a perfect excuse to say, this is why our third key demand is so important, because we want a citizens' assembly that's advised by the relevant experts. We want them to sort it out. And that's a really strong defense when they really go hard at you.
Mm-hmm.
But well done for not getting flustered and staying coherent with your arguments.
Yeah, excellent work, Brenda. Anyone else have any comments? Jane?
Yeah, look, I think it was great as well, because like pretty much every question was hard, and you have obviously a lovely, again, persona, you know, like quite calm and quite authoritative, which is really fantastic. I would just have liked to have seen more of that distinctive XR messaging. I think even with 3AW you can just, you know, say it's an emergency, we're risking human extinction. We've got to get to zero as fast as humanly possible. Time has run out. Like, you know, 3AW, they can understand that stuff. And also not to forget the theory of change, that our intention is to disrupt, our intention is to escalate the disruption. It's not because we're, you know, wanting to inconvenience people. We're sorry, but we see no alternative. So I think, you know, even with 3AW, you can get that in.
Mm-hmm.
There's a slight risk of them cutting to the ad break quicker, but but you know, but I think it's worth it, because if you can get just even one of those really strong sentences in to a 3AW audience, that's what starts to shift their thinking. Whoa, some people think that civilization is going to collapse. Whoa, could that be right? And it's not like they come over bang like that, but it shifts the window of what they think is the range of possibilities.
Yeah, it gets that conversation happening. Taxi drivers and people like that listen to 3AW, and taxi drivers talk to a lot of people, and they go, oh, there's a person on the radio the other day saying human civilization is going to end. I don't think that's right. And the passenger might go, well, actually. So it gets those conversations going, even if you don't convert people overnight. Dan, you were going to say something?
Great job, Brenda. And yeah, I mean, I thought that, you know, you had quite a folksy charm to you, and I think that consistent kind of bewilderment, like sort of a casual bewilderment, was, you know, reasonably non-threatening. And I think, combined with inserting the demands, that, you know, would have taken it to another level. I'm wondering if it's worth, and this is, I guess, a question to all of us as well, like with the personal consumption kind of questions, is it worth going, well, during COVID, emissions only dropped a really small fraction, even with a huge change in personal, you know, this is obviously systemic. Like,
That's a good one. That's a good one. Yeah, Brad.
Just with the when they try to get onto personal emissions or personal lifestyle, it's really good just to turn around and say, look, the science tells us we've now left it too late for personal change. We need root and branch systemic change from the top down, and that's why we're calling on our 3 key demands. And you bring it back to the 3 key demands again.
Okay.
Yeah, they will try to get you, like, do you eat meat? Do you drive a car? Do you use a mobile phone? They do that all the time. You can say, yeah, look, hey, it doesn't really matter what I do. I'm just one individual. If we really want to change things, we've got to get the government to start changing the laws, you know, so just flip it over on them. Yes, Jane.
Yeah, I think it's really important to emphasise that it's a systemic problem that can't be solved by individuals. We're so far past that.
Yeah.
So
it's just
not
it's not possible to make the amount of change that we need.
Yeah. Yes, Brent.
So was I too focused on the actual questions rather than thinking about my key messages?
Yeah.
Like, it's really hard, isn't it, to stick to your, what did you say? There was a particular thing that you said when in the presentation. I needed to keep my key message in my head rather than focused exclusively on the question, answering the question.
And
it's quite hard to do.
You can sometimes just not answer the question and say, look, that's a great question, but I think a more important question is, does the government have a plan?
Yeah.
It's just, you flip them. It's called flipping.
Doing the flip is quite, it's quite hard to, it's a technique, but I'm aware.
You don't want to be rude, but don't worry about being rude. This is a game. This is showbiz. This is not a personal conversation. You wouldn't do that to someone at a dinner party.
No.
And say, that's a great question, but I'm going to talk about this. That'd be rude, right? But this is not a dinner party conversation. This is a game. This is a game. This is showbiz. Yes, Jane, you want to say something?
Yeah, like I think it's really important to remember that for Extinction Rebellion, the solution is mass civil disobedience until the government capitulates and declares an emergency and acts on an emergency. For us, the solution is not renewables and electric cars, so that we're trying to give actually a really completely different message from the average NGO that goes, zero by 2050, rah, rah, more renewables, rah, rah, we just build a battery, rah, rah, electric cars, we're not interested in the micro. And in fact, I mean, what it shows is like everyone in the NGOs for all these years has been going, talk about solutions, everyone loves solutions, that'll bring people along. Well, the evidence shows that it doesn't. A personally relevant threat plus relevant action to take is what brings people along. And the solutions divide people and make people fight, like the whole electric cars thing can be used to have a fight. There's every solution you can suggest is open to causing a fight. So the more you mention those specific technologies, the more you're just digging yourself a hole in the interview. And the more you say, look, it's an emergency, nothing but a complete transformation of absolute everything at emergency speed is going to fix this. And there's all these different things. They're all parts of it. But
and that's an easy trap to fall into, Brenda, so don't feel bad because that's what...
But I think that's actually why I joined Extinction Rebellion, because I've been involved with groups where it's always been about, you got to talk about the solutions. I'm sick of writing letters to the paper about it, and I'm sick of offering. And that's why I've actually joined XR, because I do see civil disobedience as the only thing we've got left.
That's a great personal story, what you just said then.
Just gold.
Say that.
Well, it just struck me when you were talking. That's why.
Just say that next time. Just say that.
Yeah.
I mean, say, look, I've been recycling and doing all that for years. It's not working. I've joined Extinction Rebellion because I think it's good. So you can get back to the personal every time. It works wonders.
Okay.
Anyone else? All right. Well, we can do a TV one. That'll be good. So if we spend about a quarter of an hour doing a pretend TV interview, and I can do that one if you like. I can be the naughty journalist. That'll give us about a quarter of an hour, and then we can have a more general, so it's about a half an hour, just having a sort of a panel discussion, questions, free roaming discussion about everything. How's that sound?
I have to go though at 3. If I'm really sorry to do that, but I'm at someone else's house, so I sort of need to go at 3.
No, that's perfectly fine.
Okay.
Who wants to volunteer to be the Jane?
I was just thinking, I just wanted to check, at that rate, we'll only get one more person actually having a practice. That'll mean 2 people didn't get a practice. I'm just wondering if the 2 people who didn't get a practice are happy to move to discussion, or we can just do more practices.
Yeah, well, let's give it a crack and we'll see what happens. So that's a good point. And it's nothing like actually watching someone else do it is not the same as doing it yourself. So who wants to have a practice being interviewed by a TV journalist live to air? Rosaria or Dan or Marco? Come on.
Sorry, I might go after this one, just because I'm going to the toilet real quick.
Fair enough. Dan, do you want to be interviewed on television? Okay. So it's Sunrise, Breakfast Channel 7. They're not very on board. They can be a bit hostile. They'll ask you a couple of questions. They're not that bad, but it's the breakfast show. It's the day of the rebellion, like, so it's Saturday morning. The rebellion the events haven't started yet. It's in the morning, so you're going to explain what's going to happen today, and ask you a couple of naughty questions about what on earth do you think you're doing, dreadful people. Okay,
I might just, it's just raining a lot. I'm just going to move into the house. Sorry, I'll be 2 seconds.
no worries. Take your time. Okay, so you might be standing in the street or Birrong Ma or something, and the TV, the crew has come and stuck an earpiece in your ear, and they've wired you all up for sound, and they've told you to look into the camera, and I'm in the studio, and I'm saying, Dan Nathan from Extinction Rebellion, thank you for joining us.
Great to be here, Miriam.
So I hear that Extinction Rebellion is going to be disrupting the city of Melbourne today. What can we expect?
You can expect to see people coming together and demanding real action on the climate and ecological emergency, and proving that, yeah, people power is a really effective force, and this is within our hands.
So we're going to be seeing people power. What do you mean? What exactly is going to happen today?
You're going to see some people blocking roads for periods, and yeah, causing the disruption we need to get the action we desperately need. And you're going to see people playing music and yeah, creating a celebratory atmosphere as well as resistance.
So you think that blocking the roads is going to stop climate change? Do you want to explain to us exactly how annoying people and blocking the roads is going to have any impact on climate change?
Well, civil disobedience has a long history of being effective in desperate times. With Gandhi and the Indian independence movement, or the suffragettes, it's, yeah, in desperate times, calls for more desperate measures, and it's, yeah, unfortunate to be inconveniencing people, but it's really, really late. It's the 11th hour. We don't have much time to be avoiding ecological collapse and civilizational collapse.
So you think civilization is going to collapse?
I think there's
green.
Yeah, it's confronting, but that's where we're at, and that's what the scientists are telling us. And we've dragged our feet for a long time, and yes, it's, within the lifetimes of our children, we won't be able to feed ourselves anymore. It's a very real possibility.
Well, don't you think that these kind of alarmist messages and blocking traffic and this kind of thing is just turning people off and turning people away from your movement?
Yeah, I disagree with that, Miriam. The majority of Australians want action on the climate emergency, and a lot of people are inspired to see people taking that seriously and putting their bodies on the line. Yeah.
So you don't think you're just making people angry and they're going to turn away from your message?
Oh, I think some people, sure, but we also don't need the entire population to get this and want to do something about it. We only need a small portion, maybe 3.5% of people that are really committed to make change and to get our 3 demands met, which is for the government to tell the truth about this emergency, to act now for net zero emissions by 2025, and to install a citizens' assembly where people they're guided by the public on how to deal with these problems. We're not here for this offering solutions. We're here sounding the alarm.
Now, I hear there's going to be some arrests today. So when you're planning to get arrested deliberately, don't you think you're wasting a lot of the police's precious time? The police have got better things to do than to be arresting people like, people like you sitting on the road and wasting everyone's time and wasting everyone's money?
Yeah, I mean, they probably do have better things to be doing, and that's unfortunate. But that's also the police's call. We're being peaceful and non-violent. We're just sitting in a road, you know, aiming to cause disruption because it's an emergency, and if they want to arrest us, that's their call.
But we can't just have people sitting in the road and blocking the traffic. What about fire brigades and the ambulances and things, and people are running late for their very important meetings? We can't just have people blocking the roads willy-nilly and the police not doing anything about it. What are you suggesting?
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. Yeah, I guess the draw on police resources, it's unfortunate, but there are bigger things at stake, like a healthy climate and arable, and the ability to feed ourselves.
Oh, well, very well, Mr. Nathan. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Miriam.
Very good. It's harder than it looks, isn't it?
Yeah.
Anyone like to give Dan some feedback on it? You got the messages in there. Well done.
Thank you.
He got the messages in, which is good.
Yes, Brad.
Really good messaging. And I thought there was a point there where you smiled and loosened up, and that was good. There's a point a little bit later where you smiled and loosened up, and it probably didn't work in your favour because of the line of the questioning. That's all right.
I think I made him laugh. I think it was him.
Yeah. But that laughter can work at the right time is the point I'm trying to get across. You know, it can lighten that mood, and it makes you more relatable too, if you're not just being serious the whole time. So you've got that there, and you can use it for sure. It's just using that at the right time. But great work on the messaging. The only thing I'd say too about, you know, when Miriam had a crack at you about blocking the roads and emergency services, it's a good opportunity to say Extinction Rebellion has a really good track record of getting out of the way when the emergency services need to get through. We've got police liaison people. The police inform them, they inform us, and we get out of the way. And our track record proves it. So you stay not on the attack, but you can say that with authority because we've done it.
Yeah, we also do work with the police well in advance of any action so that the police know where it's going to happen. They can reroute the trams. They can warn the emergency services. So we work very closely with the police ahead of time as much as we can, so that because we're not here to harm anyone, we actually want to help people. So that's sometimes a good one to sneak in there. When I said what's coming up today, you could have actually said a bit more. I mean, it could be that you don't know, but you could have said a few more things like we're going to have the Red Rebels, we're going to have people doing bug swarms, we're going to have a pink boat flotilla on the river. You could have actually listed, without going into too much detail, some of the different things, because it's more than just roadblocks. So that might have been one thing, because it's before the event, let people know it's going to be interesting, it's going to be fun, it's going to be colourful. So it doesn't hurt to just chuck a bit of that stuff in, because we do interesting, fun, colourful things. Anyone else? How do you think it went, Brad? How did you feel? Dan, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much it would change with practice. I mean, my moments of laughter were just a crack in the act. I struggle to imagine ever being able to appear folksy or charming in that kind of setting. The nerves just give me tunnel vision, and I just, yeah.
You can be yourself. You don't have to be folksy or charming. You be yourself. Be polite, be friendly. Just be yourself. Yeah,
okay, I should have said just be myself. That's a stretch for me to imagine. I mean, even in a mock-up, I was nervous enough to have a sort of strained, serious. Yeah.
It's weird, isn't it? The pressure you can be under. Yes, Jane.
I think you might have felt strained, but you don't look strained. Like, I think, you know, the level of terror inside is not always apparent. You do need to keep looking at the camera though. Like, that's the really weird thing, especially if someone's asking you a question from the side, you know, not to let your eyes drift off and just try and really, you know, try and talk to the person through the camera, but it just feels really weird. You just got to keep trying to really sort of, you know, keep with the idea that you're actually talking through the camera straight to the audience and telling them some stuff. Yeah.
Don't be looking around like this. Sometimes when we're thinking, we sort of want to look around and there might be something funny going on in the background. Don't do that. Look straight down the barrel. If you're doing that kind of interview, or if you're talking to the journo who's there with you, they'll want you to look at them. So try not to do this. It's hard. Sometimes it's a very tempting thing to do. Anyone else? Okay, Marco, do you want to have a practice?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind, but if Peter, I think Peter also hasn't had one yet. So.
Oh, Peter's had a go. He had a go
Oh, cool.
doing print.
Yep.
Well, what'll we throw?
Rosaria hasn't though.
Rosaria, you haven't had a go yet either. Do you want to have a go?
Yeah, maybe give her a.
Okay, Rosaria. What do we do with Rosaria? What about a radio interview? What about a friendly radio interview?
Sure.
Or you want to have something harder? You want a hard one? You want a hard one? Jane?
I'm going to head off.
Okay.
Okay. What if I do a radio one that's only about as hard as the newspaper one I did?
Yeah, do like about a sort of an ABC radio, kind of a relatively middle of the road sort of radio interview. How's that sound?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. We'll make them both fairly short, like do a Rosario fairly short and a Marco fairly short, so we can still have some questions. All right. So I'll just go 2 or 3 minutes, because often that is how it is on the radio anyway. They're going to cut you off like pretty soon because they're crossing to whatever. Okay. Yeah. So we've got Rosaria now from Extinction Rebellion. Rosaria, what's happening today?
Well, today we're coming together to protest the climate emergency and to demand action from the government. We'll have a blockade going down Burke Street. We're going to have lots of colour and music and sound. We'll have a pink flotilla and lots of boats going down the Yarra. We've got a rhythm band, and there'll be people dancing and in beautiful costumes. We'll have our Red Rebels who are going to express their grief for the climate emergency. And there'll be a bike swarm with lots of flags.
And so there's going to be disruption. What are you hoping to achieve?
Well, we're in a climate emergency, Jane. So we have 3 demands. We want the government to tell the truth about the climate emergency and behave like it's real. We want them to act now. And our 3rd demand is that we want them to take advice from a citizens' assembly.
Very admirable, but aren't you just annoying people? No, there's going to be more annoyed drivers. You were annoying them last year, I remember. Now there's going to be more disruption, more anger.
Jane, there are a few people who feel annoyed at Extinction Rebellion. We're aware of that. But this annoyance is going to be nothing compared to the climate catastrophe that is coming. So we're really just sounding the alarm. Our house is on fire. What should we do? Sit around and just watch it burn? No, we're sounding the alarm, and lots of people agree with us.
Thank you, Rosario. We're over to the news now.
Well done. Well done. That's very good. You got the message in there, you got the alarm in there, you got a nice list of what's going on today. Good job. Anyone else some feedback for Rosario?
Oh, look, I was going to say, and a lovely screen presence as well. You could have done TV.
No problem. Yeah.
Sorry, that was Dan.
A bit of practice on in Black Friday.
Yeah, you did media. Did you do a radio thing or a TV thing on that one, Rosario? I know you were one of the contacts.
I did, but the TV. By the time I did the TV interview, I was actually feeling very confident. But first thing in the morning, I got a radio interview with 3AW, and unfortunately, I got caught by them. And I should share this experience because I forgot that I was in a role, and I kind of was just being myself and like talking to my best friend, which is not what the interviewer is. So they did really well anyway. Like they interviewed me for a news grab, so it was a really short interview, maybe 2 minutes. But they only used the very last thing that I said. They asked me, was it going to be a COVID safe action? And you know, I went on and on about the COVID safe action, which I should not have done. I should have said, we're in a fucking climate emergency. And yes, we will be COVID safe. Whereas I said, oh, you know, yes, we'll have masks and hand sanitizer. So yes, we'll be COVID safe. And I really should have repeated you know, I realized afterwards, but I think you have to do this in order to learn, because the only bit of my voice that they used was the bit about the masks and the hand sanitizer. Fuck it.
They do that. That's what they do. They'll often do that. It's all about practice. You know, you do it, practice, you get good at it, you get the hang of it. If you do one and you mess up or something, it's not the end of the world.
No, well, you learn for next time.
it's practice. Yeah. Dan, did you want to say something?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, yeah, inspiring, Rosario. Like, big smile in between. It was just, very effective. Well done. But for that instance you described, like, how are you supposed, if you don't know, if you don't know which section they're going to grab, and you don't want to be just saying climate emergency in every single section, how would you avoid that?
Well, can I just try answering this? I think, you know, if you know that it's going to be a really short grab, then every single answer that you give has to have your message in it. So if I ask you about, is it going to be COVID safe? First you give your message, then you say, and yes, it's going to be COVID safe. If they say to you that you're a nuisance, first you give your message, and then you say, well, maybe we are a nuisance, you know, but that's only a few people, whatever. Because they are going to take a grab, but they're probably not going to cut your sentence in half. So I reckon you can do it.
Sneaky.
That sounds boring, but yeah, as Miriam was saying, you're playing.
If you're doing it and it's pre-recorded and it's a grab and you know it's going to be cut up, just make it so they can't cut around that message, little devils. If it's live, you're going to sound a bit stupid saying that every time if it's a live interview. So it depends on what you're doing. Brad, I think, was it, or Jane wanted to say something?
I was just going to say the grab is really hard for that reason, because they can slice and dice to suit themselves. And yeah, if you get the repetition in there and the messaging as much as you can, that's good. But they're so clever. They, you know, we've all done a few grabs, and you know they just take out that little bit, and it might be a tiny bit of the news, and other times they might put even more of what you said in there. It's really out of your hands what they do and don't take. So you just do it to the best of your ability, and don't give yourself too much of a hard time about it.
Yeah, do the best you can. I did one. I think we're outside the courthouse when some people were having their day in court from the Spring Rebellion. And I spoke to the journo for about, 10 minutes or something. And in the end, they took out a grab of me saying, we have the right to protest. That was what they used. Which, I mean, we do have the right to protest. So, but yeah, you can't predict it sometimes. Just try to make sure that everything you say is gold, but it won't always be. That was terrific, Rosario. Well done. I wouldn't have any hesitation about putting you on radio. I reckon you could hold your own radio, TV, anything like that. Marco, do you want to have a practice? I know you've done this before. I think you've done a bit of media, haven't you, Marco?
Yeah, a bit. Not much with XR though.
Okay. Do you want, like, Brad to do a hard one?
Yeah, hard and brutal.
A hard one, Brad.
Glutton for punishment, Marco.
Yeah. So
right.
let's say, for example, that it's during or just after the demo, and there's been a traffic jam, and a pregnant lady has been held up in the car on the way. This is a hard one, and that's the story they want to cover, because that's what they. So if it's like a really tough one, right? So, you know, like you're being that guy Tom Elliott, and like I heard that there was a, you know, pregnant lady who got stuck in the traffic. Okay, so hard one, and various other questions. So afternoon drive show after the demo, everyone's been stuck in the traffic jams, blah blah blah. Okay.
Cool. And this is on radio? Radio.
Yeah.
Cool.
Live radio.
All right.
Afternoon, everyone. That was the 5 o'clock news. You're with Tom Elliott, 3AW Drive. We've just had a call. We've just got a call from a very distressed husband. His wife is pregnant. She's been stuck in traffic. She's about to go into labour. They're trying to get her to the hospital, and those self-indulgent so-and-so's Extinction Rebellion are at it again. We've managed to get one of them on the line. Could you please tell the audience what on earth is going on down there, Marco.
Yeah, hi, Brad. So we took mass civil disobedience today to demand our core demands of telling the truth, acting on the climate and ecological emergency, and enacting citizens' assemblies. We were obviously looking out for any emergency service vehicles as much as we can and doing as much as we could by informing them beforehand and making sure that we were moving away from those intersections as soon as those came by. But whilst we're really sorry and for that person, we are also, keeping in mind that the climate and ecological emergency is expected to take the lives of billions of people. That's what the science is telling us. That's why we're taking action, but obviously we're doing it in a way that is respectful and safe for others. And that was just a very unfortunate situation.
Okay, well, what about the life of this unborn child, Marco? I've got a very distressed potential father on the line here, and he's seriously concerned about the life of this unborn child. What would you say to him?
Well, firstly, sorry. We are sorry for the inconvenience we caused, but I think we need to be thinking about the larger issues and the reason as to which we are having to take these actions. We shouldn't need to take these mass civil disobedience actions to awaken the public and get action on the climate and ecological emergency. It should be governments, and it should have been happening ages ago. So really, we want to send our frustrations and empathy to them, but we need to be considering that these actions, it's the governments and corrupt corporations that are the reasons for us having to take action now, because they've left it too late. They've destroyed the livelihoods of billions of people into the future, and it's going to be a real it's going to be a really difficult future, particularly for younger generations like myself, who are looking like at current rates we're going to be starving to death if we continue on the same path. So it is really unfortunate, and there's only we can't do as much as we can't predict everything that's going to happen, and we did have everything in place to prevent those things, but ultimately with the climate and ecological emergency that's going to be taking the lives of billions of people if we don't act quick enough, that's the real issue. I think we have to be keeping it at the front of our minds and directing our anger and frustration towards governments and corporations that have been halting action on these issues.
Oh, look, you're talking about billions of people dying. Personally, I think you're just trying to scaremonger. And I can tell you now, our phones are running hot at the moment. Most of our listeners think you're scaremongering too. Your group has made a habit out of doing this, out of disrupting people. It was only a matter of time before something serious like this happened in somebody's life, real life, not some fantasy in the distant future, was put at risk. What do you say to all my listeners who are outraged at what you've done?
Well, just as I've already said, put your outrage and frustrations towards corporations and the government that has refused to act on this climate and ecological emergency. Like, it's not my opinions, it's the scientific community's opinions that say that we're heading for disaster, lives are already being lost, and it's much worse is to come. So whilst we are obviously deeply sorry, we are taking action for the protection of life and for the continuation of life. Like governments and corporations have to be held accountable, and that's why we should be putting our frustrations towards them, making sure we tell the truth on the climate and ecological emergency. The science is there. We need to be taking action for net zero emissions and creating people's assemblies. That's the way we're going to be getting us out of this and avoiding those billions of deaths. And obviously we need to be doing it in a way that is looking after everyone as around us in the present. And we obviously extend our deepest regrets, but that's our message.
Well, I have to ask, Marco, who are these scientists you keep referring to? Because I read articles from scientists in the Australian and in the Herald Sun, and they don't accept that this is all as bad as you say it is. They say it's a bit of a beat up, and there's a bit of a cozy club going on with this so-called peer-reviewed group. So who are these scientists you refer to?
Yeah, so these scientists are some of the most renowned in the world. They're the 98% of the scientific community have come out to say that global warming is caused by human activity, is accelerating to a point of near reversal. And we've seen the large majority, over 98% of scientists across the world say, express their extreme concerns about where we're heading with global warming and that it's caused by humans. And yeah, that's why big media empires such as Murdoch and news press have to be held accountable. And that's why our first demand is to tell the truth on the climate and ecological emergency. They are intentionally misleading the public with scientists who have been a couple here and there that have been given handouts by the fossil fuel industry to continue the lies and continue the denial. We need to be listening to the majority of the scientists on this issue. We need to be telling the truth about the climate and ecological emergency, and that's why we've been taking action.
Okay, well, thank you for your time, and I'll let my listeners decide and see what they think. Personally, I think that's a classic example of the radical left. They're all trying to drive us into a communist utopia. So now over to the listeners.
Thanks, Brad.
Yeah, and the only reason I threw that last bit on is because that's what they do. They will frame the debate at the end of it. They'll frame it just the way they want to and the way that it suits them. So yeah, look, well done, Marco. That was some pretty tough questions.
Yeah, good job.
And your messaging was spot on.
Good job. Good job. They normally wouldn't let you go on that long. Normally you'd get interrupted several times by the journo, but that's okay. It's good to practice, just to practice getting those lines out. Good job.
I didn't want to be too hard.
Yeah, too hard. I thought that was good. You got the messages in there. You did it. There was a few ums and ahs, but that's what happens especially when you're getting the hang of doing things. And don't worry about the occasional and ah. It's better to think rather than to babble or to make a mistake. So I thought that was great. You did well. There was a question begging to be asked. They would say that unborn baby faces a very dangerous future. That was a great little opening there to get that in there. And I would have said, thankfully, it was fine, and we managed to be aware. It made the police made us aware of the situation with the pregnant lady, and we cleared the path to let her through or something. Hopefully, something like that happened. You'd like to think so, but you don't need just making it up. So let's just pretend. Anyone else got any feedback? Jane?
Just with the starvation thing, I think it's always worth just saying we're already facing food and water shortages, and if we allow warming to spiral out of control, then we face the risk billions of deaths. So I think it comes out a bit extremist if you just say it without the lead up. But if you put in the fact that it's already happening now, then people start to go, yeah, it is already happening now.
Yeah, you can say we're already starting to feel global food shortages because of droughts, unstable weather, sea level rise. So food's going down, population's going up. How is this going to, what's the inevitable result of this going to be? So we're not making this up. This is actually, you can Google that, because the Tom Elliott's of this world will say, no, that's not true. Well, it actually is true. If readers don't believe me, they can Google it. That's always a good comeback if you don't have any statistics in your head.
And just on the scientists, look, they never actually do ask you which scientists say it, but if they, I'm ambivalent, like whether it's too technical, but I think it is worth saying that some of the most eminent scientists in the world, including the head of the Potsdam Institute, who advises the German Chancellor and the European Union, they're saying this.
Yeah, I'll just say NASA. I'll just say, well,
NASA. Yeah, James Hansen's good.
That's an easy one. I'll just say, well, not according to NASA. I'm not going to argue with you about climate science. You can take it up with NASA if you don't believe me.
Yeah.
That's
and I'd probably go in that direction rather than 98% of scientists say it's happening.
Yeah.
Because like I think we need to just need to leave that it's happening debate in the dust, because that's what they've done to us. They've shifted the Overton debate down to it's happening, it's not happening. Whereas we just need to go, look, we don't know for sure exactly what's going to happen, but most eminent scientists in the world are saying it's an emergency, it's an emergency, it's an emergency. Just leave that happening stuff. Don't even go there, because it's got to be treated like a complete non-issue.
Yeah, I usually snuff that candle out by saying, well, you can take that up with NASA. I'm not a climate scientist, but I believe in NASA. You know, I think they know what they're doing. There's a couple of people who are paid by the fossil fuel industry who want to stir up trouble. That's their business. Me, I'm sticking with NASA. You know, that's a really short, quick one that'll get rid of that argument. Works every time. NASA. Everyone respects NASA. And if they don't, they say, okay, well, there's some people who believe the world's flat. That's their business. Me, personally, I'm sticking with the science. You know, that kind of thing. Just pour cold water on that one. Anyone else?
Oh, just well done, Marco.
Yeah, good job.
Great job.
Well, we've got about 10 minutes left before 3:30. Does anyone want to, I tell you what, maybe we'll just go around and make some, you can say, if you've got a question that you're still not sure about, if you've got any comments to make, how did you think this went? Do you think there were some bits that were too long or some bits that were too short or something we could do to make it better next time? Anything like that. We've got 10 minutes. There's plenty of time to do that. Let's start with Rosaria.
Sure. No, I thought the presentation was really good. I liked all the, bits and pieces, looking at the different types of media, etc. I think the key thing is to have lots of practice. So I think it's really worthwhile having the questions that you're anticipating written down, having some answers written down, and then getting 3 or 4 of your friends to just grill you. And, so that you're so you don't even have to look at notes anymore. It's worth putting the time into it. It doesn't have to be hours. 3 or 4 friends for 15 minutes each. It's, do the math. It's fine. But I believe that's what helped me. I still felt nervous when I was doing it here, but I know that once I've gotten over the first few minutes, then the next time I'm okay. So